Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins is perhaps the closest thing you're going to get in regards to getting the absolute best Super Mario experience on the original Game Boy. While the original Super Mario Land was a good game in its own right and managed to emulate the gameplay of the original SMB with minor touches of its own, the game also felt a bit loose around the edges with its controls, microscopic visuals, and short length. Something was a bit off here, and what we got with that game was a fairly adequate recreation of classic Mario, but not quite there. With Super Mario Land 2, the game adopts a style not unlike Super Mario World, the initial Mario entry for the Super Nintendo, and where the predecessor failed, this one succeeds. The game feels distinctively Mario, and yet in its own subtle way, implemented a number of its own unique elements that makes this entry a little more than Mario World Light. So while Mario was busy fighting evil space aliens with submarines, super balls, and sky pop, Mario Land was slowly being taken over by bitter rival Wario, who makes his first ever appearance in this game. So Mario returns to Mario Land by playing the introductory level, and right away you notice a substantial improvement in the graphical department, as everything looks bigger, better, and more varied than the previous game. The art style and presentation takes its cue from Super Mario World and translate rather nicely onto an 8-bit monochrome format. And while less of the playing field is visible as a result of the increased sizes of the graphics, I rarely found this to be an issue when playing through the game. In general, the game looks pretty good, moves a bit slower than I would have liked, but not much of a big deal. So you got your usual complements of power-ups, super mushrooms, fire flowers, and starmen. Also added in is the Mario World spin jump, which can be performed by pressing down and A, serving as a tool to drill through bricks. There's no cape or raccoon tail to grant you temporary flying abilities, but you do get a carrot that gives you bunny ears. With these bunny ears, you can flop them constantly to radically slow your descent, almost to the point of floating downwards. It almost sort of feels like flying, I guess. The funny thing is that with this power-up, if used from a particularly high point on certain levels, you could pretty much circumvent chunks of the actual level and just get to the end without much effort, which is a little interesting little tidbit there. So your main goal in Super Mario Land 2 is to find the 6 golden coins that allows you access to Wario's castle, all of which are scattered across 6 zones. Each zone in Super Mario Land 2 has a different theme and results in different challenges and obstacles to overcome, and makes way for some impressive looking levels, perhaps some of the more interesting and creatively designed levels I've seen in a Mario game up to that point. Personally, I much enjoy this iteration of Mario in space than whatever Super Mario Galaxy could throw at me. I also like this level where you're hopping in sap, or this level where you're traversing a whale's innards. It's simply wonderful stuff and really emphasizes the creative aspect of the franchise. Control's also an improvement over the previous game, as it's fairly responsive and feels more like a traditional console-based Super Mario game than the previous game, which had somewhat floaty controls. Although the controls haven't been improved here, it still feels a bit finicky at times and I often have to take my time with certain jumps. This adds to the supposed challenge of Super Mario Land 2, but the controls aren't too bad and for the most part they work fine. It's just that there's a bit of an adjustment to be made in regards to timing and what have you. Music-wise, well, it's your typical Mario music on Game Boy. Seems to fit the game rather well, it's not tedious, it's not tiresome, it's actually quite catchy. And like Mario World, game's main theme is squeezed into other tracks in some form or another, providing a bit of consistency, if you will. Hey, you know what? It's alright. Not my favorite or anything, but it works. Unfortunately, the sound effects aren't all that great. They don't sound Mario-like. Hardware limitations? Perhaps, but even so, couldn't hurt to make it sound more Mario-like. I don't even know what that means, but whatever. Anyways. Difficulty in Super Mario Land is somewhat on the moderate side of things. Most of the zones are fairly easy, but gradually get more difficult. The final level in particular is kind of picky, but it is beatable. But whatever challenge is evident in the game is offset by the fact that it's extremely easy to build up extra lives. Aside from 1-up hearts and the extended chain of enemies you defeat after getting a Starman, you could also gamble for extra lives in the little hut somewhere. So there's very little in terms of risk. You can always build up extra lives whenever you need them. Of course, there's an option to play the game's easy mode, which reduces the number of enemies in certain levels and, makes it easier, obviously. Most gamers probably won't touch the easy mode since it's an insult to their fragile egos or something like that, but players who are having a bit of trouble might find some use for it. It's a useful tool, but it won't handhold you the whole way. You actually have to instill some effort. Alright, so here's the deal. Is Super Mario Land 2 6 golden coins worth checking out? Without a doubt, 100% affirmative. Is it worth getting a Game Boy to play this game if you don't already have one? Most definitely yes. I'd say it'd be plenty worth it to find yourself a Game Boy or Game Boy Color and track a copy of this game down. And who knows, this might actually make it to the 3DS's Virtual Console system if it isn't there already. Not only is it a respectable counterpart to the 16-bit Super Mario World, not only does it manage to perfectly replicate the classic Super Mario gameplay and overall feel, but it also manages enough neat and different ideas to be its own worthwhile entry in the Mario franchise. And if you enjoy the antics of Wario, then you could check out the game that made him famous to the point of hijacking the series with its own line of adventures. Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins is an excellent video game in a long line of excellent video games, and is well worth the few bucks you could find. I can't recommend this enough. Go for it.